Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to part 8 of the Trials Comprehensive Guide. Now, this is going to be the last video for this series for the time being. I'll come back to it eventually, but I kind of need to figure out what else I want to do that's Trials related. But yeah, this is the last of the aspect reviews. Corruption. So, first things first, Corruption, the heroes. So briefly, Enoch is close to useless. In fact, I would say it's tied for the worst hero power in Trials, along with Advanced Alexa. Then you've got Basic Nepharos, which actually can be quite good, but you need a fairly aggressive deck. Like, you really do. Like, something that is maybe Nature Corruption, or, I mean, Dominion Corruption can get some aggressive openers, but then Entangle isn't actually that good with the Dominion aggressive openers, because Assassin already has 3 speed, and so does the elf that I cannot remember the name of. But anyway. So besides that, you've got Rage works with it. You just need something aggressive. You really do to get Entangle to work. However, if you can play an aggressive deck, Entangle is a very, very powerful skill. And lastly, we've got Advanced Nepharos, which is a very, very strong control ability and will allow you to do some disgusting things later on in the game and elongate your resources in ways that other heroes just don't allow you to do. One problem is that life loss, which is a little bit of an issue, but it's still quite a powerful hero. Although I will say that none of the Corruption heroes are top tier, but 2 of them are reasonable. So, on to the commons. Starting with the creatures, we have a bit of an interesting set of creatures here. A lot of Corruption's creatures look a bit dorky to the point when they don't look very good, but they're often a lot better than they look. Nightbringer's not one of these, however. Nightbringer is just awful. 1 mana, 1/1, 2 speed flyer is just never good enough, and Demon Portal is not really something that you'll be picking, needless to say, which means that its Demon synergy is kind of useless, and its Decay ability is also fairly useless, so Nightbringer is not where you want to be for 1-drops. Plague Vermin, however, is quite powerful. You'd be surprised how useful this guy is if you just leave him on board. He will probably let you get a trade that you normally wouldn't. And I mean a trade for the Vermin for his creature as opposed to trading creatures in the first place. Vermin can be quite useful. And if you're lucky enough to get a Necromantic Cult or a Flesh Sculptor, Plague Vermin just becomes insane. But yeah, the Vermin's a decent pick. Then you got the Legionnaire, also a decent pick. Now, Legionnaire is very, very good with basic Nepharos, and not fantastic with any other hero. 1 speed really is a liability, and you can't rely on just being hyper-aggressive like you can in Constructed and burning them out, because you don't get those cards. So Legionnaire is amazing with basic Nepharos, but not very good with any of the other heroes. Onto the 2-drops. So there's 2 of them. We've got Infected Survivor, which is a quite powerful card. You'd be surprised. It turns out 1/1, 3 speed is quite annoying, and the Legionnaire that comes out of it, again, unless you're playing basic Nepharos, isn't fantastically useful, but it is there and will allow you to get some aggressive openers, which is very, very important. But the Infected Survivor himself is quite a useful body, and if you're, again, lucky enough to get Flesh Sculptor, a very, very powerful card, then he turns into 2 zombies, and at that point you can just start pushing damage. Also works extraordinarily well with Corruption's removal spells to just kill things that are normally slightly out of their damage range. Running Remains, quite powerful. It may as well have a cannot attack face clause in Trials, because you often don't want to be hitting the face, because then you lose your stats on your Running Remains. This is often just a 3/3 that sits there and will eventually trade up. That's all you need. And if you're playing, again, basic Nepharos, as I said, that works really, really well with Corruption's creature base, then you can kill the Library Guards, for instance, and that can be very, very strong. So the Running Remains is a decent pick. So far, we've actually got some pretty decent picks in the Corruption section for creatures. Zombie Giant, this falls flat a bit, and the reason for it is because you always want 2 levels in any Corruption deck way before you go up to 4 mana, which means you can't play it on curve, and that's a problem. The only one of these 3 that is good is Thunderstorm Titan. The other ones, the Hunting Gigantodon and the Zombie Giant, are just not good enough, because the 1 speed really is a liability, and you're never going to play them on curve anyway, so it's a bit sketchy. Only the 4/4 with 2 speed is actually worth it. Next, we've got Mesmerizing Spirit. the Sharpshooter, Force Mage Protector, Gibber and Ronnie of the color. This guy is absolutely amazing. And corruption decks with 3 or 4 mesmerizing spirits will go very, very far. It's always a 2-for-1. It's a flying body, works with consume spirit. It's incredibly, incredibly good. It's one of those commons that basically you see it, you pick it. There are very few commons that are more powerful than Mesmerizing Spirit, and it is one of those insanely good ones. You really have to be comparing it to things like, I mean, I think commons you pick over it are not, they're not in corruption, but commons you pick over it are things like, oh, Elf Warrior, Assassin, maybe Protector. I think you pick Protector over Spirit. I think you pick Spirit over Sharpshooter though. There's like, it's really is top tier when it comes to the commons. It's not the best common at this kind of mana. Well, at this kind of point in the curve, that goes to the Shadow Step Assassin, but it is an incredibly strong card. Do not underestimate it. Lastly, for the common creatures, we have Bedeviled Fiend. Now, Bedeviled Fiend is an interesting case here because he actually doesn't have a low health total. He has the same health total as Library Guards for the cost. It's just his attack is so large that it kind of makes it look lopsided. But it's actually not that lopsided when it comes to... I mean, his stat distribution is pretty bad. Like, a 4-4 would be crazy. But yeah, 5-3 is not bad. It will get a lot of damage in. And this especially is absolutely insane with Kayanu. If you get Kayanu with Corruption, you're going to go very far, because Corruption has some of the, both in Constructed and in Trials, has some of the biggest Kayanu targets, and this is one of them. A 6-4 for 2 mana will beat your opponent to death, and it is an incredibly strong card with Kayanu. Outside of that, it's pickable. It's not bad. I would probably prefer having some other stuff at the curve, but considering it's common, go for it. It is a reasonably powerful card and is a decent common, so it's definitely worth picking up from time to time. Now, if we move on to the spells, these are where things get a little sketchy, where you got Midnight Cravings, one of the worst cards in the game. Midnight Cravings is just not good. It looks kind of cool, but it's just not useful. It's the only instant that Corruption has, funnily enough, though. So it does have that surprise factor to it, although your secondary color will have a instant, so... yeah, so they're going to be playing around certain things anyway. But yeah, it's just not worth it on a card. The +1 speed is nice, but I mean, it would have to be +1/+1 and 1 speed until end of turn to really be playable, but it's just not worth it. Then we've got Splitting Headache, a reasonable card. It's not fantastic. It's no Mesmerizing Spirit, even though... I mean, these are the two cards that are very, very similar. Mesmerizing Spirit, Splitting Headache. They're very, very similar to each other, but, like, the creature is just so much better. It's just so much better. Weirdly enough, actually, Splitting Headache, when it cost 2 mana, was still worse than Mesmerizing. But at 3 mana, it's far worse, but it just feels a little less unfair. But picking one Splitting Headache, if you have a deck that's literally 3 Mesmerizing Spirits, I'll take a Splitting Headache, because then that's just... the more discards you have, the better it gets up to a point. Then if you get... I mean, if you have 3 Splitting Headaches and then like 3 Spirits, that's just too much, because your opponent will only ever have 1 card in hand at once, which means your Splitting Headache doesn't do as much as you'd like it to. Now, the last of the commons at the spell slot is Fumes, Noxious Fumes. One of the single best removal spells in the entire game. It is on par with Assassinate, arguably stronger because it only costs 1 mana. This is what I meant when you say the Infected Survivor is incredible, because Fumes allows you to kill Library Guards without losing your creature. It's a tempo gain. You still are down on a card, but it's a tempo gain. And being able to kill any 2/3 with 3 speed is a big deal. It also kills all of the nature creatures and Assassin out of Dominion, both Assassins, which is very important. It also kills Cronus Ravens after they've been buffed once. It is an incredibly strong removal spell, and it's one of Corruption's main strengths is their removal spells in Trials. And in Constructed as well. Now, I think that's the only... yeah, there aren't any other commons in there. On to the uncommons. Continuing with some of the high power. Infernal Vultures. A very strong card. It has 1 speed, which means, let's just say, it won't be attacking creatures anytime soon. However, it will win the game on its own. In fact, I really like picking 2 Vultures if I can. I won't pick more than that. But the first Vulture is a really good pick. Second Vulture, pretty good. It looks dorky, but it is one of the strongest cards in terms of just pound for pound power. Compare this to Power Seeker, it's just not even close. It's a permanent buff. The mill is mostly just to fuel its own ability, but it's an incredibly strong card. Now keep in mind you have to actually use the ability a few times to get it out of some removal before passing the turn the first time. So against red, get up to 4/4 if you can immediately, play for 5 mana. Against Dominion, get up to a 3/3 or 4/4 if they have a weakness counter potentially. And against Corruption, you want to be getting up to the 3/3 slot, because Consume Spirit and Fumes will only hit for 2 each in Trials, because it's very rare to go up to 3 Corruption in Trials. So make sure you get it out of that removal zone. And against Order, only, I mean, it depends on what the secondary color is, but you don't want to be putting up to 3 attack unless you can attack with it immediately, because Ray of Righteousness could hit it, and it's much better just to get in massive damage the next turn. Very, very good card. The Insatiable Ghoul, a surprising powerhouse. It's kind of astonishing how hard it is to kill a 3/4. But yeah, it's very, very difficult. Now, the drawback is extensive in Trials, because in Constructed you have lots of 1s and 2 drops. In Trials, not so much, which means that the drawback is a problem. The other problem with this card is that it's difficult to play on curve because of Mesmerizing Spirit, so you really want to go up to 2 levels. So it brings its power level down quite significantly. However, it is still incredibly strong. It is still an incredibly strong creature. Do not underestimate it. I don't like picking more than 2 of these, for instance. However, depending on your color combo, and also if you're just starting Corruption, this is an amazing card. If you're not starting Corruption, if you're starting a different color, it's a bit dawdly. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like with Gibber and Ronnie. If you're starting red, it's amazing, and if you're not starting red, it's not fantastic. Although, to be honest, I'd rather have a Ghoul than a Gibber and Ronnie, but then a Ghoul is an uncommon, so you'll be seeing them less anyway. So now we've got 2 uncommons that aren't very good. Herald of Despair and the Undead Hydra. Herald of Despair is not unpickable. It's got bad stats at the cost. Mesmerizing Spirit stats, but without flying. So yeah, pretty bad stats for the cost. Its reduced energy ability rarely comes up. It does occasionally, but not really. The main reason you pick it is to get rid of Helm of Dominion. So I will pick 1 Herald. I will not pick more than 1. Although it can also get rid of implants. Unlike the Gnome, however, yeah, unlike Gnome, it doesn't stay on the board, and you have to pay 4 mana to do it, and it's just so much worse. However, I will pick 1 just to deal with the occasional Helm, which can win you a game from time to time. And there aren't really any artifacts in Corruption, and there aren't that many artifacts outside of Dominion that you can sacrifice on your side, so it's mostly just 4 mana, destroy target Helm, which is not fantastic, but it's okay. Then we've got Undead Hydra. One of the worst conversion rates for a creature in the entire game when it comes to stat totals. For 5 mana, you could literally be looking at 6/6 with 2 speed, and it would be okay. That is the kind of buffs required for this card to actually be decent. It's just not playable. The card, I mean, the games you win with Undead Hydra, you would have won with any decent creature. It's just, at that point, your opponent just ran out of ways of dealing with creatures, and you won the game. But, I mean, with basic Nefaros, it's borderline pickable depending on the other picks, but I just don't like this card at all. Undead Necromancer. Quite a powerful card. Also insane with Kayanu, because now you get your 3/4s. In fact, as I mentioned earlier with Kayanu, you've got Insatiable Ghoul comes out as a 4/5, so more powerful than a Zombie Giant. Undead Necromancer comes out as a 3/4 with Deadly, which is just nuts. And then you've got your Bedeviled Fiend, all at common and uncommon in Corruption. So you got some serious power for Kayanu in Trials. So if you see Kayanu with Corruption, definitely try it. It is worth going into. Now, the secondary Deadly effect is much, much weaker in Trials because you have less zombies. It is still an effect, though. It's not inconsequential. It does happen. It's quite rare. It is less situational than, say, Elf Commander's secondary ability, but it is definitely not something you should be focusing on a lot. 2/3 Deadly, it's good enough. It's not a fantastic pick, but it is decent, and sometimes if you get Tombs of the Damned, for instance, oh, you pick every Necromancer you see, because that makes it really, really difficult to deal with Tombs. But anyway, so overall on the creatures for the uncommons, pretty decent. Corruption is fairly decent at the lower rarities when it comes to creatures. Onto the spells. Oh, they lose a bit of punch here. So let's just get these out of the way. Flash of Delirium's completely unpickable. Mill is not really a thing. Reanimate, I really don't like because it's good late game, but really bad in the early game, and it's basically, you can't keep a Reanimate in your hand. It's just awful in that regard. So I do not like picking Reanimate, although it's not the worst uncommon you can get, I'll put it that way. Hands from Beyond is actually pickable now, funnily enough, and it's the kind of card where if you're playing with blue, which means you have card draw, you should pick a Hands, just the one, because you're playing with blue. You got the card draw, and this lets you get amazing trades for the rest of the game and makes your opponent's life miserable. Now, being 2 mana 2 level makes it much stronger than 3 mana 1 level, which is what it used to be, and just being able to play it down with a Mesmerizing Spear on turn 5, for instance, is quite powerful. It also allows you to deal with 3 speed creatures, which is Corruption's main weakness. So yeah, Hands from Beyond is quite good in that regard. Again, not a very, very high pick, but it's a decent one. If you're playing blue, I definitely pick one up. And if you're playing basic Nepharos, it becomes even stronger, simply because now you can start hitting 3 speed creatures with your 1 speed stuff, and then your zombies become amazing. Now, there are 2 quite powerful uncommons here, Infernal Tribute and Consume. Now, Infernal Tribute is the weaker of these 2. Do not underestimate it, however. You always go up to 3 or 4 levels in Trials anyway, usually 3. And being able to just get your opponent for 2 creatures is very, very powerful. It's much, much stronger in Trials than in Constructed, mostly because of the fact that there are way less tokens around and way less just dorky creatures. There aren't that many 1-drops around as there are in Constructed, and often the games go longer, making a card like Infernal Tribute much, much stronger. Same goes with Splitting Headache. It's a lot stronger in Trials than it is in Constructed because the games themselves are slower. Consume Spirit is actually the other way around. It's weaker in Trials than in Constructed because you only go up to 2 levels, not 3, when it comes to Corruption levels. However, it still basically reads, fumes your opponent's card, buff your own stuff, and then you get an extra trade, or maybe you get lethal. It's a very, very powerful spell, one that's actually become better over time because Corruption has been able to support it more, and now I actually think Consume Spirit is the stronger spell out of it and Fumes, although it's very close in Trials. In Constructed, it's not. In Constructed, its Consume is way more powerful than Noxious Fumes, but in Trials, it is fairly close, and just be thankful there are different rarities, so you can't get them against each other as a pick. Now, I don't think there are anything else. Aha! Forgot about this guy. I always forget about the shrines. Haunted Cemetery. One of the stronger shrines in Trials. Corruption is blessed with 2 very good shrines in Trials. Now, Haunted Cemetery is a bit powered down in Trials because the Zombie Legionnaires are not as good in general. However, it is quite a grindy card and gets better with, say it with me, basic Nepharos. It seems to be something that's coming up a lot, isn't it? Yeah, Basic Nepharos works really well with Corruption. There's a reason why he's the marquee hero for the aspect. But anyway, it does work very, very well with the slowdown and also from Hands from Beyond, and strangely enough with things like Tombs of the Damned, because then you get more zombies every single turn, and as a result, it basically makes it harder for your opponent to deal with the 1 zombie a turn, because it's not 1 zombie a turn, it's 3 zombies every 2 turns, which is slightly harder to deal with. And if they only have 1, 2, 3, suddenly you're getting an extra zombie out on them every single, every 2 turns, not every single turn. So yeah, Haunted Cemetery, pretty powerful, but not the best skill shrine in Trials, but it's decent. And as far as I'm concerned, any decent skill shrine is worth a mention. Now, on to the rares. The rares for Corruption are overall fairly good. Sanctum of the Void is one of the most powerful skill shrines in Trials, tied with Cathedral in my opinion. I think Cathedral is slightly better because you can use it earlier in the game, and also you do not need to go into double Corruption to actually use it. However, Sanctum comes into its own when you're playing Advanced Nepharos, because they sack their guy and you reanimate it. That's an incredibly powerful hero power combo there. It also works very, very well with the Haunted Cemetery. So Corruption has some incredibly powerful skill shrines. And the fact that a lot of their skill shrines and also just their lower rarity creatures are quite powerful is what actually puts them decently high up in the power level when it comes to Trials. Not quite at Wisdom's level, but it's definitely not actually that bad, even though they have a severe weakness to 3-speed creatures. But yeah, Sanctum will be killing 1 thing every 3 turns, and similar to Infernal Tribute, less dorky creatures around, which means that they'll be sacrificing less tokens and less 1/1s and more actual creatures. Word of Pain is not fantastic. Life gain isn't really a thing, and this will only ever drain for 2, and it's just a bad cantrip. So I would not pick Word of Pain. It just doesn't really work. But besides that, yeah, let's get on to the third weakest rare, Deathbound Incarnate. Yes, I'm serious. That's the third weakest rare out of all of them. Sanctum, not third weakest. Actually, is it the third weakest? Sanctum's really strong. It's above Word of Pain and... No, it may actually be the second weakest out of all the rares. Never realized how powerful the rares are in Corruption. Anyway, so Deathbound Incarnate, the reason he's not quite as good is because he needs to hit them 3 times to win. And in the late game, yes, he's crazy good, but chances are they'll be taking normal damage throughout the game. And Deathbound Incarnate needs to hit them 3 times, and nothing else can hit them is the problem. Which means often he's just a big wall. He's a very powerful wall. He's a 10-10 wall. The problem is you can't really hit them, because if they're not in danger of losing, they just let it through, and if they are in danger of losing, they chump block him, and it doesn't matter if the rest of your creatures get through, because you're trying to win through milling. So often you accidentally win through damage when you have an Incarnate on board. It's kind of funny. So he's just a big wall. A very difficult to deal with wall, but he's a very... he is a wall, and he will let you win the game through other means, but it just doesn't synergize very well with the way Trials decks are constructed. Definitely an okay pickup, though, for the late game. Now, from there, this is where the craziness starts for Corruption. They have some serious power at this rarity. Harpy. Harpy is ridiculous. Now, it does actually sacrifice your own stuff a lot, which is not a good thing. But anyway, it also kills pretty much half the creatures in your opponent's deck immediately. It's incredibly strong in Trials. There's so many level 1 creatures, and it's the only time you will see a Thunderstorm Titan getting sacked to a Harpy. Because Thunderstorm Titan is a decently high pick, and Harpy just kills it dead. It's very good against Dominion. They need to assassinate it, but if they do not have the assassinate, they're in serious trouble, because a lot of their cards are level 1. Very powerful counter to both Nature and Dominion, 2 of the strongest aspects in Trials. Then we've got Flesh Sculptor. I mentioned this with Vermin. Vermin is incredibly good with Flesh Sculptor because it makes a Legionnaire. Now, the main reason Flesh Sculptor is so powerful is twofold. One, it's Cataclysm protection, which is very good. Also Fire Blast protection, but mostly Cataclysm. That, and it will allow you to overwhelm your opponent with zombies and actually aggro them down, which you wouldn't think you could do very easily, but if you have a couple Flesh Sculptors, you definitely can. Just one Flesh Sculptor is good. This is one of those things where you see a Flesh Sculptor, it's pretty good, but it's not the best pick imaginable. But if you already have a Flesh Sculptor, you pick every single one you see, because once you start getting multiples of these, if you get a deck with 3 Flesh Sculptors and you put them all on the board at once, your opponent can't win from that point. It's just absurd in multiples. When it's just one, it's very powerful, but it's very vulnerable to single target removal as well. Alright, on to some of the late game threats. Tombs of the Damned, the zombie generator. Now, this works very well with basic Nepharos and also Haunted Cemetery and Hands from Beyond, and it has a lot of synergy. And also Necromancer. However, 2/3s are very common, which means Tombs of the Damned will often be quite awkward and move all the zombies back for several turns before actually moving them forward, giving your opponent a decent amount of time to respond to the tempo loss from the tombs, since you can't move your zombies forward, and just keep attacking you, and sometimes that's enough to win the game. However, Tombs is the king of grindy games and has infinite value stapled onto it and should never be underestimated and is a very high pick. Then we've got the Dread Knight, the heaviest hitting creature in Corruption, well, minus the Incarnate, but the heaviest hitting damaging creature in Incarnate. Laughably has Deadly. I always found that kind of amusing. It does come up every so often, but very rarely. But yeah, it's quite expensive, but putting 2 creatures on the back row means that you don't lose any tempo from playing your big 6/6. And the Dread Knight is very hard to stop. In fact, if he just keeps attacking, it's very difficult to stop him, and multiple Dread Knights is close to impossible to race, because they play a Dread Knight, they put 2 of your attackers back, you move them forward, they attack, and you're like, do I trade and get 2 for 1 or 3 for 1, or do I try and race it? And if you decide to try and race it, and they have something like a Succubus or another Dread Knight, they play a second Dread Knight, move the 2 attackers back, and you get where this is going. Now, it does have a severe weakness to swift creatures because you move them back and they just move forward and attack again. However, besides that, it is quite a powerful creature. It also can't do anything to flying creatures, but flying is a much more powerful ability than people give it credit for. Succubus. Now, Succubus is one of those cards that looks fairly innocuous, but is actually very, very powerful. This is something that comes up in Constructed a lot more, where you look at this thing as like, Drain 3, no. Drain 3 is amazing. That and 3/3, Flying Body, doesn't have 3 speed. It's unfortunate, but yeah, it'd be crazy if it did. But Corruption creatures don't really get 3 speed. But yeah, 3/3 Flying Body is quite good. And the Drain for 3 is fairly powerful, because it means it basically hits for 6 in the first attack, because it already hit for 3. You also gain some life. Why is this important? Advanced Nepharos. You lose life per ability usage, which means having a Succubus gains you back just over 1 activation, which can be fairly essential. That and gaining some life, incidentally, can help you win a few games. Now, besides that, this is very unfair with Advanced Nepharos because you just keep attacking and trading with things and then reanimating it every other turn, and you gain a life each time you do it. And you drain them for 3, so it gets very unfair with Advanced Nepharos. Succubus is quite powerful, and is always worth picking up 1, in my opinion. I think 2 or 3, it's a very high pick rare. It's not the highest pick rare in Corruption, but it's always stable. I pick it over Dread Knight. I think I probably would not pick it over Necromantic Cult or Sanctum, unless I already have a Skill Shrine, then I'll pick the Succubus over it. But I think I pick Sanctum, Cult, Tombs maybe, depending on my deck. Harpy, depending on my deck, because if I have a lot of level 1 creatures, it can actually hurt you a lot. Things like that, but Succubus is a fairly high pick. It's a lot stronger than it looks. And lastly, the Necromantic Cult. The dreaded Necromantic Cult. Necromantic Cult, first of all, here's the Kainu support again if you get Necro Cult. But yeah, Necro Cult is a card that basically says, I win the game if it isn't removed, and it's very powerful. The main reason for this is because, yep, much like Infernal Tribute, Trials games are slower, which means that Necromantic Cult sits on the back row and gains counters and will rip your opponent apart piece by piece. That, and because Infernal Tribute is more powerful, you've got more removal effects you can actually play, and so the Necro Cult actually gets more powerful. On top of that, you can use him with other minus effects like Fumes to kill things that have high HP, or even in Dominion you can shrink something and assassinate. That does come up. Dominion Corruption is not an insane combo because you're kind of required to go double Corruption, double Dominion, as you may have noticed, because you need double on both of those sides. A lot of these high power level Corruption cards are 2 Corruption. Infernal Tribute, Necromantic Cult, Tombs of the Damned, Dread Knight, Succubus, all these really strong cards. Sanctum, they all require double Corruption, which means splashing Corruption, not really a thing. That's where a lot of consistency loss comes from, why it falls below Dominion, Nature, and Wisdom, in my opinion, even though the power level of a lot of their cards is incredibly high. But if you can make it work, Dominion's Assassinate along with Necromantic Cult is a very unfair combo, so you can make use of that. It also works well with Rage in particular, because you can burn stuff and then shrink it down to kill it. So it is a very, very powerful card and should never be underestimated. It's almost a you see it, you pick it. Would not pick more than 2, however. I would pass the 3rd Necro Cult because it's very slow. If you can slow down the game, which you usually can with Corruption, but if you can slow down the game, Necro Cult is very, very good. But you don't want to pick too many of them if you're given the option, simply because they're very slow. I'll put it that way. But anyway, so that's Corruption in a nutshell. Actually, no, I've forgotten something, haven't I? The Epics. Partly because one of them's completely unusable. Portal. It's much like Burning Rage, although it kills you faster. Ziara, always forget about this. I actually, forgot about the Epics. That's kind of funny. But anyway, Ziara is weird. So, in Trials, it is often going to win the game on its own, simply because you play Ziara and all of your opponent's creatures don't do damage anymore. And Ziara is very hard to beat if your opponent can play it. Now, it's one of those cards which is kind of weird because you play it and if it kills a whole bunch of your creatures it gets bigger, but then if they have single target removal, you kind of lost. However, when you're playing against someone with a whole bunch of 1-2s and 2-3s, suddenly they all do no damage. And this is something which one of the closest games I ever played in Trials was actually as a blue order Elric deck. My opponent played Ziara, and my damage on board got cut from 10 down to 2, I think. It was just some ridiculous damage reduction because it's -1/-1 to every single creature. But the other thing is, like, if your opponent has a lot of 1/1s or has 1/2s like Assassin, yeah, Ziara makes it completely useless. It also kills things like Mesmerizing Spirit out of the blue. So I wouldn't underestimate it. It's not a very high pick, but is reasonably powerful. It's no Red Dragon, it's no Antriel, Kartha, Strela, but it's up there in terms of the epics. It's definitely pickable. So anyway, overall with Corruption, you're looking at something a bit interesting here, where the commons and uncommons are all quite strong. And that should, on its own, make it one of the strongest aspects, right? Well, kind of. And then you look at the rares, and you're like, hang on a sec, these rares are really strong. But the problem is twofold. First of all, you're relying on key cards or a key hero to deal with the 3-speed problem, as I like to refer to it. The 3-speed problem is the fact that Corruption just can't deal with 3-speed creatures very easily. You need either basic Nepharos or Hands from Beyond to actually do it, and that's a significant issue. The other problem with Corruption is consistency, because all of your high-powered cards are double Corruption, which means if you end up in an aspect combination that doesn't have draw power, you're forced to go 4 levels, you're down a lot of cards, and while Corruption all has 2-for-1s on their creatures and on their spells, they don't have any direct card draw. So if you're paired with another aspect that doesn't have direct card draw and you're forced to go to 4 levels, you're losing a lot of cards for no reason, and it's actually difficult to... Basically, you're in top deck mode and your opponent isn't. Your top decks are very powerful, but it's not nice being in top deck mode because you're basically relying on luck of the draw at that point. So it does lose a lot of consistency-based games in the long run, and that's where Corruption kind of falls flat a little bit. Nowhere near as much as Order and Rage do, however. In fact, since we're at the end of this sort of aspect comparison set of videos, if I had to rate the aspects in power level, I would do it like this. I would say Dominion at the top, then you got Nature, followed by Wisdom, bit of a drop, and then you got Wisdom, and Corruption slightly below, and then a bit of a drop, and then you've got Rage and Order kind of at the same point. I would actually say Rage is worse than Order. Okay, the Rage heroes are much better than the Order ones. However, the actual card base, I think, for Order is slightly better. They're both bad, is the point. I think Rage may be slightly better just because they have 2 very powerful heroes, whereas Order, one okay hero compared to 2 very powerful heroes, one of which is incredibly strong and the other one is fairly okay. So I think Rage probably edges out a bit just on hero powers, quite frankly. So yeah, there's the listing there. Dominion, Nature, Wisdom, Corruption, Rage, and Order in last place. But anyway, that would be about it for my Corruption aspect overview and this section of this series. Thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or want to ask me any questions about the video, put it in the comment section below. But as for now, it's been Jotto, signing off.